We're live.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to M&M Exhibition Poultry Talking Chickens. Mike and Matt, today we've got a special guest. It's Jonathan Patterson. For we that have known him since he was just a itty-bitty boy, JP. So we're going to cover some topics today. A few things what Jonathan might want to talk about, what we want to talk about. Just cover and just have a good conversation. I'm going to remind everybody, if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit subscribe and like. It helps a lot on our YouTube channel, which is Talking Chickens.
Also for Spotify.
Spotify also.
Because when we do a new one, it's going to pop up and tell you there's a new one out there. So that's kind of an added feature. Another thing we're doing today that we've never done before, and we'll see if it's working, but we did live stream this through our StreamYard through to Facebook. So you can actually type comments if you're seeing this live on Facebook, and we will try to respond to them.
Or not.
Or not. Depends.
Yeah, we edit on the fly quite often.
We'll just ignore you.
Yeah, there you go.
And we're pretty good at that too. So Jonathan, tell us how the year's going. I know you're busy. You got the babies, you got the crop business and everything, but how's it going there in Indiana?
Yep. So far, so good as far as the crop side. You know, I work in crop inputs, liquid fertilizers, and we got off to a pretty early start in our area. So the summer is cruising right along. I got almost 4-year-old and a almost 2-year-old at the house, a little girl and little boy, if you don't know that. So they keep us really busy in our spare time. And then when I do have an hour, these days 5 minutes, I try to make it out to the barn and raise some chickens. So I've got about 300 chicks on the ground, mostly bantams. My large fowl white Wyandottes are unfortunately not doing very well this year. I might have 10 or 15 of them out, but Buff Wyandotte project's going good. Bill Patterson and I kind of teamed up and bought a flock of single comb buff leghorn bantams, and we're both, I think, doing pretty well with those. I've probably got 60 or 80 of those out. I haven't tallied it up, but I've got some hatching as we speak. So some brown red Wyandottes, another kind of fun project, sort of an oopsie that popped out of my buff project, and Fabian Negron, he's had a few pop out, so we're sharing those back and forth. So that's kind of where we're at on the bird front. Most everything's really small, so it'll be fall or winter before I have anything really worth looking at.
I hear you.
That's kind of the way it is here too. It's been a lagging year.
I got some stuff out more than I've ever got out, and what I usually get everything out of and win with, of course, is, we went with the white coach and bantams. Well, I have 12.
Yeah, 12. That's we're doing the same thing. Big whites versus little whites. I guess it's just not their year.
No, it's not. We got blacks up the wazoo. I got brown reds everywhere. I have big blacks. I have buffs. Everything went great. The whites, this has been a year that when they were going steady in January and February, I didn't want to hatch, which is usually never a problem. Well, this year when I started hatching, I'd have one hen, and then she'd go broody, and I might have another hen. I mean, when you got 9 females and you end up with 12 chicks, and fertility has been wonderful. I just don't have any.
Eggs.
Yeah, my problem has been mostly fertility. I had 2 pretty nice cockerels going into winter on the big white Wyandottes. One had got infested with mites about 3 different times, and after the 3rd time, I finally said, just let nature take its course. So now I'm down to 3 males, and I think the average age of those 3 is about 3.5 years old. And I started hatching the first week of December, and I have, like I said, I think I got 12, maybe 15 chicks. Yeah. And I'm going to have to phone a friend and have them help me out with a couple males this year, I think, to get the project back up and going, because I've had those for 26 years now, and I can't afford to lose them.
Now you got to use a lifeline now, Jonathan.
That's right. And man, I tell you, the lifelines are getting harder and harder to find these days.
Yeah, they are. It's nice when you have them, But there's never many anyway that you could, never any that you could call and know that you're going to get what you need because they see them like you do, you know.
That's right.
And it's that way. And I think every breed, large fowl, it's even slimmer
That's right.
because of the numbers of large fowl. But I hope you get enough out to at least perpetuate for
Well,
next year.
I figured it out pretty quickly. I've always been a large fowl guy. I mean, anytime anybody ever asks me, I'm a large fowl guy. And here I am. I've got more varieties of bantams, and I have one large fowl variety. That's it. I've never had one. It's always been multiple. And but man, I can put 10 bantams in the same space. I can put 2 large fowl, and that's just very appealing to me at this point in my life. So
Yeah, and as George Priest told me back in 1978, he said, keep raising those Cochin Bantams no matter how much you love the large fowl because they cost less to raise and you can get more out of them.
that's right.
It's absolutely true. I mean, it's amazing to me that something you have to put, sometimes, you know, it's 10, 11 months before we get a large fowl that's really in shape enough to really pop, and sometimes longer. And in a Bantam, a lot of times 5 months, 6 months, you're done, you're there.
Yeah.
And you can get 3
Yeah.
generations out easily in 2 years. And large fowl, maybe you'll get 2 generations out in 2 years.
Yeah, that's it. And you might have, you plan to do, you know, hey, I've got some 10-month-old birds that are ready to breed. But that second generation, it just does not click. So you may hatch, you know, 2019 for me was a really good year. I hatched 150. I had probably 25 pullets that were worth keeping, probably 8 or 10 males. And the last like 5 years, I'm getting 50 chicks, maybe 75, and I get about 10 good ones. And it's like, it's kind of cyclical, I think, sometimes. And the same matings don't always produce the same quality.
No, Matt's got a perfect story for that.
Oh, yeah.
Wind-up bantams.
Years ago, I raised about 300 black wind-up bantams out of 3 trios, and I didn't like any of them. I mean, they were all terrible, and I was going to quit. And old Louis Cunningham told me, he goes, "Oh, here's what you do: put them same birds back together the next year. The next year, 2 best of shows, and I don't know how many rose comb clan, same birds, exact same matings, nothing changed because I got rid of all the young ones and I kept those 3 trios." And I explain that. There's no explanation for it. I think along with the genetics, there's timing. Because I've had that before with other breeds and varieties where you just don't put them together at the right time and you don't get anything worth a hoot, which is one reason why I've got chicks over here cheaping in the incubator, and that's it, because summer chicks never do well for me. I just have never been able to grow them. I guess if you had an air conditioned building, you might be able to do it, but they get too warm. They don't grow right. And so that spring and fall has always been better for me than winter and summer. And I think the timing of it has got as much to do with it as genetics, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Tim Bowles told me that story. It has a very similar story like that. He said, don't get discouraged. And it might've been Dan Padgett, but they said, don't get discouraged if a mating doesn't work and you think it's going to work, try it again. You know, if it just doesn't always work the way you want on the year that you want it, but the genetics are there and they'll come out. But like you said, what if I could figure out how to make it work every time, I would.
Well, it's like my dad always said, Joe Lewis's mom and dad had like 12 kids and there was only one Joe Lewis in the whole bunch of them. You know,
there you go.
Same way in race horses or anything, just because the next year might be nothing like the horse that's this year. And it's the same way with chicken. So, hey, that kind of leads us into our first little topic here, breeding and sticking to it and learning as you go. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So, kind of preface this. This is, I don't know, your 6th, 7th, 8th episode. I have really been getting a kick out of it.
You're
number 8. All right. Yeah, I've listened to all of them, and I just love the little tangents that you guys get off on, and I always want to join the conversation because I feel like we're at the restaurant after a chicken show every time.
Yeah.
But you guys had hit on this a little bit talking with Matt McCammon last week about how people will mate up a mating or even an outcross on color or a breed, and they do one generation and they get the chicks and they say, oh well, to hell with that. That didn't work. And I've kind of played around. I watched a few guys like yourselves, listened to several stories about guys crossbreeding, even like Menorcas and Langshans or Rocks and Wyandottes. And I thought, I think I could probably do some of these projects. I can see where we're going. And I made a little note here after I sent you the outline on what the meaning of standard bred is. And we're not like dogs or cattle or some of the other big species or big livestock where we have pedigrees and registrations and it's all about purity. We're breeding for a standard. And I think people maybe sometimes don't get creative enough on outcrossing to other breeds or other varieties. And then when they do, they give up way too easy.
Right.
So kind of going back to our point on hatching numbers and things that don't click the first time, I had started a Buff Wyandotte Bantam project in 2020. So had just by happenstance, I found some nice White Rock Bantams and I picked them up on a whim because I thought they were worth working with. Brett Thompson had sent me home with a couple trios of White Wyandotte Bantams before he got out of them. And I always loved his line and ended up losing a male. Didn't hardly hatch any of the Buff Rocks, but I had a Buff Rock male and I had these two Buff Wyandotte females, and my brain got to going. I thought, if I cross those two, maybe I could make some Buff Wyandotte Bantams, because since Lou Horton got out of them, you just don't hardly ever see them.
Nope.
So did that first generation. They look like maybe like a poor brown red or a bad quail or brassy back. It's kind of just a mix of the three colors. And I was talking to somebody at a show, and he said, just don't keep those. If you get a buff male, if you can find a pure buff male, cross those in, and you'll get back to buff. Well, they were right. So second generation, I was able to get some buff chicks. The females came buff and pretty decent buff. The males, they kind of look like New Hampshires and brown reds, and you get a lot of color variation there. But because they're BAMs and I can hatch a lot of numbers without too much of a headache, I'm on my 9th and 10th generation on those here in 5 years. Just like you said, turning 2 generations, and the males are coming a lot more consistent. Still getting a little black in the tails and wings, but the females are looking really nice. So, I talked to several older guys that said, you won't live long enough to see that through. Well, it's actually gone a little quicker than some of my other purebred projects.
We've actually done that same cross on several different breeds many times. So buff to white, buff to black is never a problem. But again, most of them will make that first cross and think, oh my God. So I tell everybody, you got to keep going back to buff, or I've done it with partridge as well. You got to keep going back to the color you want. If you don't have that bird, you're out of business. But as long as you can go back to a pure color, that white is always recessive white. We don't have much dominant white in anything out here that I've ever found that was completely dominant white. Most of it's kind of split, but it'll cover it up eventually. And we've done it several times. And I think the only time I ever had an issue with an outcross like that was with mottled. I could never get the mottled out of the partridge. They always had like a mottled tinge on their hackle. Although they were gorgeous partridge, they had a little white feather on it all the way around their hackle. And I could never get rid of that. And that was the only time I never had luck with it. But white is usually always in the background. Another thing you have to do when you cross to white is you got to know what's behind it. So most of that black coming in is barred. So the barred and Colombian ticking is showing up a little bit in your buffs, but that's not a bad thing, because all them old buff guys wanted to keep that in the females a little bit to keep the color.
Yep.
So,
yep.
I've seen what you've showed the last couple of times you've had them out, and yeah, they've come a long way. At least you've got past that no spike on the comb that Lou always had trouble with. And then his had a lot of Orpington influence, because that's what he used, and he never really got that fluffiness, that look, that Orpington look out of the males. The females weren't too bad, but he went at it a while, and then there's not another thing is a lot of this stuff, and everybody wonders why they're not very good. There's no demand for it. So unless it's ready to go in a show cage and win best of breed, they don't want it.
That's right.
And you got to show buff Wyandottes against blacks and silver lace and whites, and they have a real and partridge, and they have a real short margin of getting against them and doing well. So
Yep.
it's a labor of love for sure.
Yeah, it is, and you guys hit on it last week again with Matt on. There's a lot of Wyandottes out there right now, but a lot of them aren't right.
Yeah,
And I'm trying to stamp my eye of a Wyandotte into these Bantams so they kind of look different than the whites and the blacks and the partridge that are being shown. So I think it's going to come down to until I get my consistency where I can, I got to lay down like 5 good pullets, 5 good cockerels, 4 or 5 hens, 4 or 5 cockbirds, show a big display of them. And then you can champion the variety a little bit and people will start to take notice. And I think that's where a lot of people get discouraged too is, hey, I'm showing my whatever, and I can't ever beat the popular variety. Well, how many are you showing? Well, I show a pair everywhere I go. It's like, well, it's easy to forget them as a judge if you're going through them, and especially if they're just mediocre.
That was the old George Schroeffler advice to everybody raising rare breeds. I remember I was just a kid, and he would say, "You got to show enough of them goddamn things to make them judge them." He goes, "That's why I bring 2 buff ducks." He goes, "I bring 2 old males, 2 old females, and then maybe a trio." So he showed buff ducks back in the day when nobody had them. Very few people had them, and he would show a slew of them, and that was why they had to actually go get their standard out and judge them. So I always remembered that. And he says, I don't care what you like, as long as you're feeding them, you're the one that has to do that. But he says, you don't show 1 or 2. And that's the truth. You have to get enough of them in there to, I don't even care if it's a white variety. You got to show enough of them to show your consistency in breeding. I can see a bad breeder real well if I see the number on the card and they got 5 white rock cockerels in there and they're all different types. I mean, so that picks up pretty quick. And then I also recognize a good breeder. If they got 5 in there that are the same, they might not be perfect, but you see the consistency in their program.
Well, you've judged enough shows. Because you're APA and ABA, correct?
That's right.
I give him his ABA test.
That's right. Same. Well, but if you're going down through and it's a lesser known whatever. To me, I could equate this to large fowl right now with the barn builders. What's her name, Matt?
Michelle.
Oh,
her last name.
She's done those.
Ward, yes.
She's done to those, and this is to me a great compliment. What Skip Bittner did to the Morans.
Yeah, exactly.
When she shows them, she shows they're in perfect condition. They're clean. They know what they're doing. And she shows enough of them. Well, when you're going then and looking, you're not looking at the same breeds we're used to picking because there's a hell of a display of barn builders there. So it helps you get out of your variety or your breed if you lay them down and have them in condition and just they sparkle. For no other. And it's like that in a lot of different things, but she comes to mind. That's how you take something that's new or we don't see much, and if you really are dedicated to it and you want it, you lay them down and you make us work.
Yep. Chuck, we noticed that last week. We noticed that last week because Mike got to judge a large fowl at Tri-State, and he had an exceptional barn-veldt cockerel. And I don't know that I've ever seen one on a large fowl. I've seen some bantams, but never seen a large fowl that good. And that cockerel was there last week, and he was just starting to break a little bit in the tail. He had some cotton start showing up in the base of his tail because you could tell he's probably ready to go to molt. But she had this pullet, and I took her out 2 or 3 times because I told Mike, I said, she is penciled all the way up the tail, and the top 2 main tail feathers are right. And I said, that is probably the best colored female I ever seen. And she was just a young pullet. I'd say 5-6 months old. I think she ended up going best large fowl. that was a heck of a bird. And to be able to do 1 month to do a cockerel, the next month to do a pullet, and still have some nice old birds in there. I mean, I had to look at the hen real hard. I had to look at the cockbird real hard, but that
Yep.
pullet just, when they get you, they get you. And I told him, I said, that's the best female I ever seen for color, type, and condition all put together. And she did really well with it. So
Yep.
Yeah, and
I
she was
got
showing the depth of the flock.
exactly.
Having the old and the young birds, and this is for the viewers. This is kind of what prompted me getting on this episode. Is I text Mike last week after their episode, and he kind of went on a rant about people not getting their birds in condition and putting their best foot forward. And I said, man, you're dead on. You hit the nail on the head, because we judge a lot of really nice birds, but they forget to clip the beaks, or they don't wash their feet, or they just don't go through the steps. But if somebody can do that, Skip is a great example. I saw he just got his Hall of Fame exhibitor, and I would venture to say 90% of those points were on black copper Morans. I know he had Orpingtons for a while and did really well, him and his wife. But kudos to him, because he put the work in. He conditioned the heck out of them. Coming from the show dog world, we know a handful of people that have done well coming from dogs with poultry. But he also put a boatload of miles on to get those out there and promote that breed. And now they've become a front runner for not only champion continental, but champion reserve large fowl.
Yep.
Right.
It's funny we say that, because the first time I ever met Skip, I had like 110 Morans at Columbus, and I'd already been warned by all these people. I said, well, you know me, there ain't too many people shake me. So I got all the way done with him, and he had an exceptional Wheaton hen. I mean, as good a colored Wheaton for an off breed that I've ever seen. And I actually made that Wheaton hen. I know it was best Moran, but I think it went reserve continental. I think that's the first time he'd ever run with a Wheaton. And he said nobody ever looks at them. They all look at the black coppers and kind of overlook the other colors.
Yeah.
And it went up on Champion Row, and that was a nice bird. I remember it well. And we had long talks. We've had many talks since then, but he was kind of abrasive at first. But sometimes when you hit sandpaper with a bigger grit of sandpaper, it kind of smooths out faster. So,
That's
so
right.
we had our little talk, but he was glad that he was appreciative. And over the years, I know I've picked his birds many times, and then when there's a problem with him, I tell him that too. So
Sure.
he's done a wonderful job with them. Another one I'll mention while we were talking about that is I got to do the Watermall National up at the Congress. So I'm kind of familiar with them because I ran into them many years ago in California. I'd never seen them before, and I was kind of impressed with the birds that were out there. And then you didn't see them for a while, and then Christine Garrison's moved back to Tennessee from California, so she's brought a pile with them, and then I think Greenfire Farms imported some, and now you're starting to see more of them in several colors. And they had reserve rosecomb cleanleg up there, and some a class of some tremendous other rosecomb cleanleg breeds. So from something that was inactive 10 years ago to go to that's saying something for those people. And I think that's going to be a breed to be reckoned with on Champion Row here in the next several
Yeah.
years, because they seem to be picking up.
Yeah, I think so. I've had my license for 10 years, or APA license anyway, for 10 years. And I don't think I ever saw a water mall up until maybe 3 years ago. Might have been the last time I was in California. I think I saw some, and
There's
then
a
there
lot
were
of them
some
out
down
there.
at there were a few down at Brett Thompson's show in Alabama this year. So they're getting spread out.
Yep.
And I remember you picked that bird at Congress. I can't remember who I texted. Somebody that was out there, might have been Dan Castle. I said, a water mall for I can't remember, was it champion or reserve?
It's funny you say that, but when we do the Congress, it's a little different, and I actually like it. We have a best of breed Champion Row, so all your breeds are up there, and then the reserves behind them. And when we go down through there, all the judges pick the class champions, not just the one doing it. So I only did the water malls because I only did in Rosecomb Cleanlight. I only did that class. So all the other judges did the other classes. So I didn't have a whole lot of input, but we kind of went around a little bit, and some of the old time judges that was up there with me, Jeff and a couple others, said, that's a damn good water mall. And everything else we kind of pick a little bit. They just wasn't in condition. That bird was in perfect condition. And if you know anything about quail color, I don't know there's any more difficult color to try to raise. And she that was Kristen's bird, and she had it down pat, and it was the right type. very good condition. It was clean. It was, it was ready to go. So it kind of stuck out, and it got all the votes. So it
That's
surprised
cool.
me that it went that far because I liked it. That's why I had it up there. But it was going up against a really good Seabright, a really good Wyandotte, a really good Rosecomb, some other breeds that I didn't think it could beat, and everybody else liked it too. So that's always a good day when you do that, is get one
Yep.
that far. You say that again. I know at the APA National in Shawnee, for single comb clean leg, for reserve, I picked a Barnvelder Bantam, which was again another one that's come a long ways, and don't see them much here, but I know they have them out that way. And I actually had to pick another single comb clean leg because they're not recognized on the APA side.
Right.
But that was a nice bird too.
Yeah, it
So
was a really
they're
good bird.
there, and I appreciate those breeders, and it's good that they get recognized for their work because it's awful. I know as well as I do over the years with all these projects, it can get discouraging.
That's
And
right.
I've kept going on some, and I've give some up for that reason because it frustrates you. So I'm glad to see them come to the top, and those are several breeds that have really come on the last few years.
Yep. No, somebody's got to be able to put them forward, and they need to be recognized. And it is hard to beat the established breeds. If you're in single comb clean leg, you're fighting really good Leghorns. You're fighting really good Rocks and Reds and New
Yep.
Hampshires. But if you can pick those apart, and the Barnevelder's there, and it's all there,
Yep.
man, you got to put it up there. Give it a chance. If the scale of points is there for a reason, it's to help us to not give favoritism to certain things, and
Exactly.
that's the fun part for me on judging is finding
Well,
that little treasure.
you say this, and I remember years ago at the Indiana State Fair, some old fat guy from Ohio put a white-faced black Spanish up on Champion Row and had to sell it to Jeff and Clell to boot. So, and again, that was a very good bird, a good example of breed, and something you never see. I know old Jack Patterson liked to come unglued. He couldn't believe that I put that up there. I said, I go fault it. I said, "Hey, you go look at the standard," and a couple people did, and I had to tell them what type of Spanish is supposed to have. It's not Leghorn type. They got to have a little more back. They're
Yep.
kind of between a Leghorn and a Minorca. They're not real long, but they're not real short and sweepy either. And that was a good bird. I mean, it was probably one in a million, but that was a good bird.
Yeah. So I have to tell the story on that. I hope we're okay on time, but
Oh,
Oh,
you're
um,
we're
fine.
good. Go ahead.
so anybody who's been in the hobby for more than 8 or 10 years would know who Bud Hudson is. And he had really good White Rock large fowl and several other breeds, but he was known for the White Rocks. And that was my goal all through, like my childhood into adulthood was to beat him at Indiana State Fair with a White Wyandotte. And I never pulled it off, but I got him that year with that white faced black Spanish. And, uh, but the backstory on that white faced black Spanish, when Keith Bramwell was at University of Arkansas, he had a program going with those birds, and he had showed me some pictures at Columbus one year, and we got talking about different things. And he said, "Well, I really like your salmon favorals, which are really they were dad's favorals." But he said, "I'd trade you some eggs for some eggs if you want to do that." I said, "Absolutely." So he got some favorable eggs, and we got some Spanish eggs, and that's what we got. Was we had that hen. Had some really nice cockerels, but man, they were so stinking wild. They were those
Oh
birds
yeah.
that you had to catch them from the rafters, and if you touched them, they were screaming like a child being murdered. And I couldn't tolerate that, so I ended up sending them
It's
down the road.
definitely a love hate breed because you got to go for that. And further on that story, because Emily was out there during all that as well. So those birds actually were found. The Spanish Bantams, and there was a great breeder out there, and Mike knows him, and we knew him back in the day. His name was Joe Templeton. He
Yeah.
had
That's
white
it.
faced black Spanish large Falcon Bantam, and he had Buttercup large Falcon Bantam. Well, Joe had passed, and nobody really knew what happened. Well, Bramwell found them at a swap meet, and it was his family getting rid of the birds. They just wanted them gone. So he bought the Buttercup Bantams and the Spanish Bantams, and there wasn't very many of them, and they'd been going for a few years and fairly well inbred, but they had the resources there where like the first year they raised like 1,000 of them, and then Michael and Emily and John Alden and a couple of the others that were there at the time, Zach Rose,
Zach
they
Rose. Yep.
yeah, they sorted them down, and then the next year they raised like 1,000 more, and they're giving everybody buttercups and
Yep.
Spanish Bantams that wants them because they can't keep them all. And they really wasn't allowed to leave the farm, so they were kind of biosecure. So they would give you eggs or take eggs, but to get the actual birds was kind of tough. So they sent eggs everywhere, and I think almost all the Spanish bantams and buttercup bantams that are out there are descended from that group, because
Yeah.
they were pretty much extinct up until then. And it was kind of neat that he did that. He did that with several other breeds when they was able to do that at the school, and I think now that's all they've all went straight commercial and kind of got out of playing with the
Yeah.
purebred birds. But yeah, that's a good story, because there's a couple guys, Ray Dillon and Doug up in Coshocton are working on buttercup bantams, and I've been
Oh, Doug Hummel. Yep. Yep.
yeah, we had a pretty good class at Tri-State and I was trying to tell them the difference, in what we're looking for. So the buttercup bantams need some color work, but they've got some of them are fairly well combed. And same thing with the large fowl. Large fowl may have a little better color, but they got some type troubles, I think. So it's good to see there's interest in them. When we were kids, there was a guy in Indiana named W.C. Fields, of all things, and it was the World Buttercup Federation, and he promoted those things like, they were white rocks. He was about the only one that had them, but I remember seeing them then, a lot better color. I mean, their color was almost perfect, and it really stuck out. So I think the color has slipped a little bit over the years, but if they
A
keep at it,
lot
they'll
of
get it. Yeah,
smutty color. I call it oatmeal, but those little barbs or whatever it's not
yeah, they're
barring.
muddled.
It's kind of like a round. Yeah. They just
Yep, they're
don't.
muddled.
There's no distinction there anymore.
When they get it right, they'll see it real quick, and you got to have
That's
the.
right.
And I by far I'm not the world's greatest buttercup breeder in the world, and I try to help as
Yeah.
much as I can. But when they see it the right color, they're going to know it. It's just if it's there. Hopefully, it's hiding in there somewhere. They raise enough of them, they'll be able to. Because I know Doug's raised 100, well over 100, I think.
That's good.
And I you starting a buttercup club. I do see on Facebook they're doing that. So another neat breed that's coming around that it was almost gone and coming back. So Bill Wolf even commented up there that Carl Fosbrink's probably smiling, because that was always kind of his little pet project, was buttercup large fowl. He was always playing with them a little bit.
Jonathan, let's talk about your interpreting the words and the written description of the standard, on how you take that description. I'd say with the aid of, well, I'm old, so the shillings, but where you can see how that equates to what you're looking for in your breeding pen, and to go a little further, not just from the judge's standpoint, but how you try to adjust those things for a breeding pen, where you have to keep that picture in your head of what you're going for, and not get lost in the weeds on every other freaking thing you can get lost in the weeds on.
Yeah. I think the shillings to me are the gold standard. I know we're supposed to use the written word, but I feel like he kind of caught the essence of the breeds. I'll take this sort of a step further, but I'm on the judges licensing committee in the APA, and we have a criteria that the person needs to be a member for 5 years or more and had a little bit of background in raising different varieties and different breeds. And I share that because I think that's the piece that's very important to understanding that written word. So, for example, if you get a silhouette of a white rock, a white Wyandotte, and a white Orpington, take the color away from it, but just the silhouette. A Wyandotte and an Orpington kind of look pretty close together. A rock is kind of similar, clean leg, clean lines. But when you start reading the standard and you hear moderately short leg or moderately long back, those types of words, or long legs, it's in relation to the other breeds that are like that breed, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
for me, it's kind of, I've always said that the best judges are typically some of your best breeders. And it's because they can see those distinctions between, what is an overly large comb, or what is a medium comb versus a small comb. you don't really get to put those words into context without looking at a lot of different birds and comparing breeds to other breeds. So that's why I made a note on talking about that. I think a lot of the newcomers, they come in and they they need to train their eye, and the best way for them to train their eye is to look past just the breed they have. Like I think all three of us have spent a considerable amount of time with Wyandottes. I think the premise is people, they understand that Wyandotte should be round, but it shouldn't be as round as a basketball. So a round underline. Yeah, that's right. And but if you're only raising Wyandottes, or you're only going through the Wyandotte row at a show, you can't separate that breed and go over and look at a coaching and say, oh, that's what they mean by too much cushion, or bunny tail, or its legs are too short, or its legs are too long, because a Wyandotte's going to be somewhere between, on leg length, between a cochin and let's say like a Leghorn or a Minorca, something that's real leggy. So I think those words, if people would sit down, read those, and compare them to other breeds that kind of look alike, they would start to understand what those written descriptions actually mean, because there is no measurement. That's what makes it hard. What is moderately long? Is that 5 inches? Is it 3 inches? Is it 8? We don't know. But if we compare,
I always say that you got to have an eye for them, and that's a whole bunch of words that don't really mean much unless you see judges or breeders that don't have it. So some people never get that eye for whatever, and if you don't have that eye, and I see that with a lot of prospective judges, because I was on the ABA licensing committee for a few years myself, and some people never get that. They just don't have it. So you can't just look for defects and disqualifications. You have to have an eye for the total picture and be able to take that 100 points and get to some resolute number. So I find the pigeon judges are bad about that. They always judge by a scorecard. So they'll throw out a number, but then when I grill them pigeon judges on how'd you get to that number, where are your point cuts to get down to that 93 or 92, they never have anything below a 90, which I can't ever figure out, because I've seen some really bad pigeons, but they can't explain that. So they don't have the training programs that we do. If you're a pigeon judge, it's because you raised pigeons a long time and they think you might be a good judge. There's no real qualification to go be a pigeon judge, no apprenticeship, no tests, no. So I think that eye, like you said, you got to have an eye for birds, and not just your birds or your breed or your variety, but all varieties. You got to be able to look over that African goose and say that's a good or a bad one. And I think the real challenge, and it was for me when I first started, is you have to go get that eye for breeds you absolutely hate. So that was tough, because there's a couple breeds and Mike will tell you he's about the same way I am on a couple of them. We absolutely hate them, but we know a good one. And so you don't want to be overly critical of them, but when the good one comes out, I've been known to pick them just because that's a good. Let's put Langshans, for example. I actually despise them, but I picked many of them over the years. New Hampshire's another one. That's a chicken that just doesn't appeal to me, never will. And I listened to Ed Mongol for 53 years harping on New Hampshire's, but he was never going to make me love one, but I knew how to judge one. So, and I think on the vice side of that, when I first started, I had lots of trouble with Cayuga ducks and buff ducks. George helped me with the buff ducks, but it took for a long time with Louis and a few other Cayuga breeders because there's so much variation in the show.
Yeah.
You can get in there. Moderns was not my thing. Vic Sterneman and Henry Mager and he's gone now, but he used to show down there in North Carolina. Those guys kind of got me in the corner one time after I just butchered a class of moderns and give me a little test or a little education. So I was, and I went and got some. And then I understood them a little better, because I was always kind of afraid of them, because it wasn't my thing. But I think that eye and getting that familiarity with breeds you don't know is the secret to judging. But it does help you down the road in breeding other things, because you start to look at them on that point scale, and that scale of points is the most important thing we got. And if you can't use that as a breeder or a judge, you're pretty much screwed in my mind.
You are, and I want to add to that that okay, it's always been the way I think of things is that someone that is a good judge in anything, eh, be it horses, be it cows, be it pigs. A lot of times they can walk in and they can't tell you why, but they'll look and say, that looks like a really good chicken.
Yep.
Or you can go and you're sitting there at a state fair and nothing else to do, and you're watching them show cattle. If you don't care, you'll say, man, that's a good looking cow. Because it fills your eye. You don't always know why, and that's where we come in. We got to know why, but there's something it's hard to explain to people that just have no eye for anything of beauty. Whether I mean a flower, whatever, but I mean it fills. It hits the right spots within what you're seeing. Now you don't know what you're seeing, but you like what you see. And I think if you lean into that and then learn the particulars, you're a lot better off no matter what sort of judging of anything that you do in livestock.
Yeah, you said that in the last one, and that was what I was agreeing on as well. It's you use the word balance, and that's one of my favorite words when judging. You know, you get a legger, and this is kind of something I've been paying attention to lately because I have the single comb buffs. The whites tend to have the most balance out of the varieties of leggers. Darks a lot of times are kind of high in the front and they've got the tail, but they're not balanced, or their legs are maybe a little too far forward. The buffs, the wing carriage is too low, so they're holding their shoulders down and their wings are pointing down kind of ahead of their hock, and it just throws their balance all off. And if you can catch that and then put that into context with the words, you're going to be a really good judge. And I think that's what I like. And to Matt's point about taking breeders of cayugas and breeders of buff ducks or the Sternamans of the world and the moderns. When I was going through the apprenticeship program, I called Jim Salee. He was the chairman at the time, and I said, I do not know modern games. Don't care for them, don't like them. Couldn't tell you why one's better than another. And he said, you're in Indiana, you need to go see Vic Sterneman. Well, Vic's about a 4-hour drive from me, and he hatched 1,200 moderns that day. You think I got an education on moderns? Or that year, I said that day, that he hatched 1,200 moderns that year, and they were coming out of everywhere. But when you can line those up and start seeing the subtle differences and what makes a good one from a bad one, that's a lot of fun, and that experience is invaluable.
And I worry about a lot of the, I was going to say younger, let's not say younger, let's say haven't judged very long judges that we have is not, you have to have enough, you have to know what you're not that good at.
Yeah.
I mean, not that you haven't picked the right one, but you are not comfortable there. To have the chutzpah to find someone that has them and just go listen and ask questions, but basically shut the hell up and let them tell you, and then you add to that on, so it's in your head. Vic Sterneman, I screwed up moderns a few years ago, even though I'd raised moderns and won with moderns. I screwed them up, and I come to him as he was sitting there, and I said, Vic, I effed these all up. And he said, yes, you did. I said, you got time? He said, love to. He got the stick out, and away we went. Well, I've just a modern national since then. I mean, what was there in Shawnee? There were 300 or 400.
Yeah, there was 300 plus.
I was very, I mean, it was like, yep, that's what
I used to cringe with cayuga ducks because here, and Jonathan will testify to this, you're going to have to do a lot of waterfowl. You're going to have to do a lot of large fowl just in fairs or wherever. So I knew I was going to have to learn them, but I used to cringe when I get them because I have a saying that I can't share here, but of what they look like. But and I had to go get those breeders, and Louis was great because Louis is very direct. Very look at this point, this point, and this point, and this section, and I could break the duck down. And then I got kind of thinking, some of these look like black pecans, and some of them look like black mallards, and we went somewhere in between that duck. And I now I have an idea, and I give Rick Hare and Alexandria some credit over the years because they consistently put down what I consider to be the right type cayuga, not
Yeah,
that big old black pekin looking one, and not that
Yeah.
black mallard looking one.
but
Um,
you took the time to do
yep.
that. Well, you and I both did. When someone, bitches about our old English judge, it's okay. Just go tell Bill Wolf.
Yeah, it's his fault.
I mean, but we learned there. We learned coachings, big coachings. We had Ed Miller, and we had Bob Ensign and Keith LeGrand and D. Ross Blanford. We'd see them. Those are our breeds. So we got right in there with them. I can go on and on. In waterfowl with me, which I still, I could do call ducks. I'm not worried about them, but man, some of those other ones. But I've talked to Tim Bowles. I went and walked with Tim. I've walked with Matt. It's like, what am I looking at? What did I miss? Now I may be done, but I want to be better next time.
Yep.
Because
I did that with the Welsh Harlequins. So,
Yep.
when they hit the fray, that was a tough duck to judge, I thought, because that was a new standard. There wasn't very many of them, and I had run into a bunch of them before Jake Wilson got into them. So when he come along with the big pile of them, I was ready for him because I kind of knew what I wanted in type and color. So I enjoy it. Last year I got to do waterfowl at Kentucky, and it was like a district meet, but my show wasn't the district meet. I was the behind the district meet, but there was big classes of Welsh Harlequins, big classes of pekins, big classes of cayugas, buff ducks, nice geese. So I don't get to do them as often as what I normally do or used to do, I guess. But I actually enjoyed that day, and I even went and got Mike a couple times. I said, "Come look at this tufted Roman." I said, "It's the best one I ever seen." And there were some very good palms and chinas and all the way through that class.
Unfortunately, it was Nate's. We felt bad about putting Nate up because I don't.
Yeah, he does. He does have his tufted Romans down pat. But another though thing is I know he started with probably not the greatest stuff. I mean, he's worked it. He's got him to
Yeah.
the point where he had maybe 10 tufted Romans there, and they all look alike. I don't have a little small one. I don't have a great big one. I don't have, he's got consistency across to all of his sexes. I mean, the males are good. He had an old hen there that was just in immaculate condition that really caught my eye from the minute I walked by her. Um, so those things, I guess those things were the things that I struggle with. Most of the bantams I had raised, a lot of breeds of large fowl I didn't have trouble with. I mean, I jumped right in on them. Every once in a while, I'll run across a color variety maybe that's not. I'll have no problem. Well, I told Mike last year I got at the Congress, I got the naked neck class, and they had every color in naked neck and a rainbow, and a lot of them. And I had to go get the standard out because I couldn't remember what was recognized and what wasn't. Well, everything there was recognized, so got into those and actually, had to really look at them because there were several colors and a couple different types and sizes all over the place. But it was a nice class of birds that you just don't see normally, I guess. And we all can buzz down through rocks and Wyandottes and Cochins pretty much, but every once in a while you get into something you got to really start working on.
Yeah, it's that damn Burkholder's fault. You know that guy, don't you? That damn Burkholder.
Oh yeah. Wade and Michelle. And don't forget Ed Hayworth, out there in Oklahoma. And Brian Gates out there in Missouri.
Oh yeah, Brian's got the big ones. That's for damn sure.
I got to judge both of theirs out at Shawnee last year. Same thing, Matt. I had to get the standard out because I placed a blue as a reserve breed, and I couldn't do that, so had to go back and change it. But to Mike's point, we screw up, man. We're people. So you get into a class, and some days you just have an off day, and you're going through the birds, and you don't quite see what you think is a good whatever modern coaching. And you get down to the class, and you pick your best of breed, and you walk away and go, man, I don't know. Maybe I should have done. Maybe I don't know. That third place bird looks pretty good now, and you just got to go with your gut.
You got that 1 minute to look at them. That's it. You got 1 minute. I always hate when they're laying an egg. So that's killed me a couple times recently. I get there, I know it's a good bird. It looks like a good bird, but it wants to lay an egg, and you got your minute. So a lot of times I'll go on, and then I'll come back, and before I actually mark the tags, I'll give it every chance to lay that egg and get it out of the way so I can actually judge the bird. But there's nothing worse on a female than being ready to lay an egg when the judge hits the cage because you just can't tell what's going on.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. But one thing about poultry judging that the other livestock breeds maybe this is an unfair advantage. I don't know, but you go to a hog show, you go to a cattle show, you go to any other species really, and the judge is mic'd up. He's talking about his placings. The audience knows exactly what he's looking at, what he's thinking. In poultry, it's almost like a big secret. We close off the aisles. I think it's okay to turn around, like judge a class. Don't let people get in the way, but judge your class. I think it's okay to turn around and make a quick point with the breeders if they're paying attention, and have a discussion with them quickly. Like to me, we have to judge so many birds nowadays. 450 to 500 birds a weekend.
It's hard to do.
But at the same time, if it takes me an extra hour to have a couple 5 or 10 minute conversations, I think that's fair. And it makes me a better judge. It helps the exhibitors have a better understanding of what we're doing. So anyway, that's the part I enjoy.
I agree with you. And something else, and then I know what Matt's going to say, but every other breed, right? So you're going to go to, let's say you show Basset Hounds. When you get the catalog, who's judging the Basset Hounds, right? And the Basset Hound judge knows that he's judging Basset Hounds.
Yep.
Well, not only do we keep, because everyone wants to pretend this is like real freaking money. This ain't no money, right?
That's right.
I've had horses. No, this ain't shit. So, but the judge is better, because if I'm coming to your show and you tell me maybe a couple of days before, Mike, we're going to have you do all or come clean-legged, you're going to do this class and this class of geese, it gives me a day to think, oh shit, what should I go over I haven't seen for a while that may be here? I think you'd have much better judging instead of showing up, and how many times who are you judging with? I don't have a clue. What are you judging? I don't know. They haven't told me. Well, it's 9 o'clock. We start in 1 minute. We have no clue what the hell we're doing, but I got a stick and a pen. Let's roll, baby.
Or my favorite, they do tell you what you're going to judge, but it's only 250 birds, and the other guy that you're with can't. He's struggling or overloaded. So they say, "Oh, hey, can you do the guineas?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not prepared to do the guineas." It is what it is, and I think the three of us have this in common, and probably just about every judge is. We may not like them all, like Matt said, but we do respect them all. So for me, I put me on whatever. I don't care. I have my preference. Like I love judging large fowl, but man, I've done a couple big classes. I did a big class of call ducks in Wisconsin 2 years ago. I had a blast, and I was scared to death because I'm not a call duck guy. I don't breed them. I'm not known for them. But I had a blast, and I hope I picked the right ones. I felt like I picked the right ones, but I don't know that everybody understands that. Like I'm having a ball out there. I may not pick your bird, but just know that I enjoyed it. I gave them a fair shake, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you about them when it's over.
And the bigger the class and the better the depth, the more fun you have.
Oh yes, absolutely, 100%.
Really, I mean, it's like I got to get my shit together here. Or as John Beamer goes, when he turns that hat on backwards, he's judging, baby.
It's serious.
It's go time.
I'm gonna see Beamer here in a few weeks. Some of our Canadian friends and Kyle Tripp for Tyler Murray's wedding. So
I'll be there.
Yeah, but I gotta miss it. My cousin's getting married at the same time.
It's gonna be a poultry show reunion.
Yes, it is. We're gonna have us some fun. Go ahead, Matt. You had something to say?
No, I had this, and so you talk about. I always try to stop and spend some time with exhibitors if I got it. That's one of the reasons why I hate double shows and being in a big hurry. But we was at Buckeye last week, and it was a single show, and this poor lady, we're doing the juniors first, so she's kind of walking along with us, and she wants to learn. Well, she had bought this silky, and it was
I was his clerk. You don't think
Mike was my clerk, so. But she had bought this silky, and she told me that's a mottled silky. I said, "Ma'am, there's no such thing. We cannot have that." And you have to understand. I think we just got done with some standard work, and silkies are the number 2 breed now. So they passed moderns as the number 2 breed in the ABA, and probably about a third of the ABA members are silky breeders. So there's a whole bunch of them out there. But this lady paid I'm not even going to tell you how much, but a fortune for this bird. And what it was a bad paint. It was
Four
Yeah.
white.
figures.
What?
Four figures.
Yeah, white with, and it wasn't a very good silky. And so I explained to her the difference. And at the end of the day, I went and introduced her to Patty Bailey and Melissa Shuckers. And I said, these ladies raise good silkies and they're not going to cheat you.
Yeah.
That's the problem with some breeds. And
Yeah.
I feel some of these silky people are taking advantage on birds. I would pull the heads off of them. So they're
Yeah.
not good birds, but they're able to get the money out of them. And I sure wish someone would talk to us before they go make that investment, because it's just a type of bird that attracts people that will spend it.
Well,
You could have the
they
best
look at
white
it
rock
more as
in
a
the
pet.
right. You could have the best white rock in the world, and you're not going to get $1,000 out of that.
No, you might get 150 if you're lucky.
Right, and it could win best of show, but a marginal silky of some undescript color brings this crazy money, and these people are doing a big disservice to our hobby, because these people are getting cheated, and then they're getting discouraged when they take them to a show and they
Yeah.
hear what
And
they got.
and don't get us wrong. They're very reputable. We know a lot of really good silky breeders.
Yep.
That help people out, and you can learn from them.
And I'm all about getting a fair price for your
Oh
bird.
yeah,
I don't ever argue with anybody on price. If I want the bird, I'm going to pay what they want for it, because I realize what went into it.
That's
But
right.
if not much went into it and you're getting that kind of money out of it, then there's a difference between bird jockeys and
yes,
people that are actual breeders.
yes.
Yeah.
And I see that in this. Well, I've seen it in the Seramas for years, but now I see it in these silkies, and I just cringe when I hear what. I wish they wouldn't even tell me what they paid for them, because
And
yeah.
and the silky's so tough. Like I made another note about DQs and defects, and this is perfect, kind of a perfect segue. But I judged out. I think it was the Apache show there in Arizona. It'd be Kyle Tripp and Lacey Greer, and Jeff Hallback lives down there. But man, I think I had over 100 silkies at that show, and I DQ'd more than half of them. Split wings, weak wings, the wrong comb, only 4 toes. The silky has they're like that over accessorized chicken. And that is a tough breed. And that's another thing that we have to teach our newcomers, is that difference between DQs and defects, because it took me a while, actually, probably up until the last 4 or 5 years, did I really correlate DQs with hereditary issues. Like split wing is a DQ, because if you have it in your flock, it's hard as heck to get out. If you have duck foot, like I fight duck foot in my big white Wyandottes, it's always the best one. So as soon as you're getting ready for your first show of the year, it's like, man, that pullet's really stinking good. I think she's got a shot at show champion. You get her washed up, you put her in the show cage, and you're watching her pace, and it's like, I think she might be duck foot. God dang it. Well, guess what? Her offspring are going to be duck foot too. So you're dead on there, Matt, where if we can just do a better job of helping people with those things.
That's the most important showmanship question we put in that list of questions we devised years ago, was, tell me the difference between a DQ and a defect, and give me an example on your bird. And you'd be surprised how many adults can't do that.
Yeah.
A lot of defects they think are DQs, and a lot of DQs they think are defects. So yeah, that's definitely something that, as breeders, judges, whatever, you need to know those pretty regular and across all breeds. So again, with silkies, we got all those parts, and I've unfortunately, I guess I shouldn't say unfortunately, fortunately, I've judged a lot of silky nationals over the years, and a lot of the reason is just because those people that raise them say, Matt, you actually look at them. I've judged a lot of Polish nationals, so some judges in breeds they don't like tend to just buzz through them and chunk them back in. Where I've been around silky breeders. Clay Dove, his mom and dad were the first master breeder of white silkies, and I've by osmosis, I've learned way about more of them than I ever wanted to. Same way with Naked Necks. Todd Cosart was the Naked Neck Club president. So Naked Neck and Russian Orloffs, I had to hear on every ride to every show we ever went to, and all their fine points. So you have to be able to get in there and do it. And I just wish some of these people would talk to other breeders or other people, judges, whatever, before they go buy and spend all this money.
Yeah, yeah, because and people ask me all the time. This is one advantage that our hobby has over the other livestock species is it does not cost a lot of money to get started.
No.
You can buy really good birds from any one of us for 50 to 100 bucks a piece. You get a trio, spend 200, 250 bucks, go hatch 25, 30 chicks. You're probably going to get a few good ones, and that's one thing I'm amazed. I followed some of these Facebook pages and the amount of money people are getting for eggs, hatching eggs. And I'm like, why not just buy a trio for the same amount of money and you can hatch all the chicks you want, and there's less risk in that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a
so
lottery ticket. It's just like scratching off a scratch
exactly,
off.
and
And
I think that's
yeah,
why they like it.
and again, like you said, we can get them started out. And one of the things we said on many shows, we're starting them on third base. I think you probably got a little better start than what we probably did. We
Oh
actually
yeah,
started with absolute junk, and where there wasn't junior shows, and there wasn't, and you had to. Somebody's calling me from New York. That's not good. You have to. You have to actually breed your way into. And once you got going, then the next year that guy that was helping you or mentoring you a little bit would say, "Now I got the bird you need. Do
that's right.
this." And you come and you had to wait a year. You go back home, and then we go back next fall and go to the show. Finally, get in
Yeah,
the hotel room. We get to talk about it, and then, yep, you did good here, or you screwed this up, and so it took a long time. I think now we start at a lot of higher level, and we expect a whole lot better results. So you're starting with really good birds, and you're wanting to raise really good birds, and it will do that. But I think it probably benefited us in the day to start with junk and raise a lot of junk and weed out the junk, because
I think
back then
I'm.
birds were $5 or $10. It wasn't,
Yeah,
a $50 bird was like a show champion. So it's changed
I,
that way a little bit, but that may be for the good, because not many people persevered back then, except us hard-headed ones that they couldn't get us to go away, so they kept giving us birds. So,
I,
I
you
think they're going to hang
know,
around. They keep coming every year.
Matt, I think for me, I'm probably better off buying the mediocre birds and trying to build them up because every time I've bought good, spent good
They
money from
die.
good birds thinking I'm going to get a head start, I screw them up. So
Yeah, they
I've done
die.
that more times than I can count.
Usually or if I don't sell one they offer me a lot of money for, it always dies. It's like a
That's right.
ghost.
Yep. Yep. Tim Bowles always said, he goes, if somebody offers you 200 bucks or 250 bucks for your
Sell it.
shirt, you take it because it'll die in the crate on the way home.
That's right. That's my dad in horses. That's what he say. He told me, he'd say, son, if they ever offer you what you think it's worth, you sell it
Yeah.
because you know that you'll make another. You got to have confidence in yourself that it wasn't. I don't know how I did this. I mean,
Yep.
you got to have enough confidence. And if you still got the breeders there, but talking about the mediocre birds or the midline birds, I've had more luck. Not luck. I've enjoyed it more by going out, and how many times we've dug through sale pens.
Oh, we're the sale pen
I'm
rooters.
telling you, when you finally hit it,
Yes.
it it's a fantastic feeling. It's like I knew I could do that. I knew I
What,
could put tails on barred
so
rocks. I knew it,
one
whatever it
thing,
is.
His best comment
you,
is always, "Well, they got better birds in the sale pen than they got in the show,
yes.
so we'll be over
Yep.
there buying the sale birds."
When you guys will laugh because you've been in it a lot longer than I have. But when I was a kid, Tommy Stanley was, he was the guy to get your large fowl from,
Oh
and
yeah,
or like a Dwayne Urch. But Tommy would come to the Columbus show. And this is before Facebook and all the online stuff. I bet there's 10 to 1 birds sold before the show nowadays that never
Oh
even see
yeah,
the sale pens. But
yep.
back then, the good birds were in the sale pens, and I used to, Dad, we got to get off school on Friday. As soon as we can get the truck loaded, we got to get over to Columbus, and I want to go through Tommy's pens because I know he's got, you name it. At the time, it would for me, it was like golden lace Wyandottes or some
yep,
kind of color that you don't see a lot of, and you knew he'd have them in good quality. And
yep. I miss
I miss
Tommy.
those days.
And Tommy used to take the whole front row of sale pens at Columbus, so he
Yeah,
would he would rent like 75 sale pens. So he always had. And the good thing about Tommy over the years is, I believe me, I was in lots of projects, but whatever I didn't want and I didn't sell at the end of the day at Columbus, I said, Tommy, you want these birds? He would take everything. So
Yep.
he was able to, in silver penciled Wyandottes when I was doing those, I think I raised like 100 of them one year, and I have way too many of them. And they were just, like you said, mediocre. And I said, Tommy, got all these silver pencils. You got a market for them? Yep. Created them up and took them off. So
Yep.
I always
They'll
loved
go somewhere.
I miss Tommy when he died because he always took whatever I didn't sell.
But man,
Yep.
I hated it when he beat my ass.
Oh yeah, he would do it.
We go in, and I don't know. I entered like maybe 10 or 15 big whites, Wyandottes.
Yep.
Had them all washed up. I'm telling you, Jonathan, they look like $1 million. And of course, you know me. They're, each one's at a separate, and we do all that. Here come Tommy. They're in market crates.
So,
Yeah, with 20 other birds
on the top of a flatbed truck.
He pulls this white pullet out there, and I went, oh shit! Now she rode all
done.
Didn't have one speck on her. He whooped my ass and had champion the show, and I'll never forget that. I said to myself, I go to all this trouble. Tommy comes in, drags him out of a
market crate.
A market crate, puts him in there, and goes, "There you go." There she went.
That's that is the story behind my white Wyandottes. Was again, if anybody's been in the hobby more than 6 or 8 years, they would know the Akers family, Doug and Marilyn, and Pete and I grew up together, so we were in the same class in school, and that's kind of how I got started showing poultry, was through the Akers 26 years ago when I was 12 years old, and they would go up to Hallbacks every year, get baby chicks, bring them back down for themselves and for the club members for Boone County 4-H Poultry, and that's kind of where the Central Indiana show started from. But anyway, they brought me back some white Wyandottes. I liked the look of them. They looked kind of stout and mean, and I wanted to get a few of those. So they were Herb Holt strain, and I remember I got them to maturity, but they were split wing. A couple of them went blind. Never hatched anything out of those. But the next year, Doug and Pete were telling me you ought to look and see what Tommy Stanley has, because he's got a lot of good large fowl. So I got a menagerie, but I got some white Wyandottes. I got some single comb dark brown leghorns. I used to show those pretty heavily. Mm-hmm. Some Elaine Shans, some buff Cochins, and really liked the buff or the white Wyandottes. I did real well with them right out of the gate. And then I saw an ad in the poultry press for Shelby Harrington. He had $100, $200, and $300 white Wyandotte trios. And, this would have been 2000, 2001. And I remember telling Dad, I said, this guy's got, his Wyandottes have to be good. And he's just laughing at me. He's like, that's an awful lot of money for chickens, John. He said, if you want them, it's your money. You call him and you tell him what you want. And he said, we'll go pick them up if he can bring them to Columbus. So I spent $300. I got a $100 trio and a $200 trio. And just like you said, he made me pay for them up front. I took him home, hatched him. A couple years later, we were talking at a show, and he's kind of chuckling because I was doing pretty well with him. And he said, do you need anything? I said, well, I need a male. I got this, I've crossed his line and Tommy Stanley, wherever his came from. And there was something I was looking for. And he says, well, you come over here and you just look through these cockerels and you take one. And that always meant a lot to me, because I put that equity in up front. And then from then on out, it wasn't about the money. It was, okay, how can we help each other?
Yeah.
Lord knows we miss Shelby. We done lots of deals over the years. The best story I got on Shelby before we get out of here, because we're past an hour, but Mike and I got in the barred rock business, and we'll have to say how we got in the barred rock business for another day. But we got these barred rocks, and I think I raised 150. I think Mike raised 150, and Schaefer raised 150. So we go to Columbus that year. I got white rock pullets like 10 deep, but we got about 8 or 9 of these barred rock pullets and a couple cockerels. And cockerels I really liked. And Harry Hallback gets to judge the rocks. So we go through there. We're showing against Shelby, Hugh Barnett, Kurt Keene.
Oh, man, the big boys.
We got no lightweights in here. So we went best of breed with a barred rock cockerel. And Harry comes over, Jeff's in there. And Harry goes, that's the best barred rock cockerel I've ever seen. I'm going to make him best of breed. And there was probably, I told Shelby, there's probably 10 whites in here better than that barred rock. But God damn it, Harry likes it. So it did. It won. So we got Shelby that time. That was one of the few times that we ever got.
Yeah.
It was on a barge, which if anybody knows Shelby, his first birds were barred rocks. So he actually started with bards. And
Yeah, tough competition.
I miss him. We used to have a ball when we was at a
Yeah,
show together.
he was fun, and
Great competitor, but boy, he'd do anything for you if he liked
he'd
you.
help you. He would help you. Well, boys, we got to wrap this up, and I want to give our shameless plug for our sponsor, Rozier's Poultry Supply. If you need anything to do with poultry, whether you're looking for books or cups or medications or incubators or whatever you need, go to www.rozierpoultrysupplies.com.
You got questions? Call Caitlin and Tim. They'll
Yeah,
definitely
call Caitlin and Tim. I'd advise talking to Caitlin. She's just a little bit. Let's just say Tim and Matt and I get along real well, so that should tell you how Tim's sense of humor is.
Yep.
So, but
an update before we get out of here. So, I've got this experiment I'm running with Ivomec and Merrick's, and I had a white Chanticleer male that kind of had a little head twist. And I thought, shoot, here we go again. So I run, Caitlin sold me the sheep Ivomec drench because I got some pills that we use for pigeons, but I wanted the drench so I could run it in the water on everything just to see what it did. But I had put enough, I think it's like a quarter of a teaspoon per gallon. So I made up 5 gallons worth of this Ivomec drench and run it in those. I got 10 4x8 dog kennels that all my birds usually run into, the breeder birds, but that bird was in there in the breeding pen, and I hadn't got any fertility out of him all year. And I think Mike seen him when his head was twisted, and
yeah,
I ran that for a week, and I was out there yesterday, and by God, I don't notice the head twist. So, and then I had a guy here, Jimmy Church was here to get feed, and they were talking about Ivomec and cancer and all kinds of Ivomec and this and that. So there may be something to that, and we're still pursuing it. I'm curious when I get the chicks on the ground, which is going to happen as soon as we're done here, is they're getting on the ground. But that's when I usually notice the Merrick's kicking in on the Chanticleers once they've been down on the ground for a couple of weeks. So next week I'm going to run that Ivomec drench in the water again. I don't think it can hurt them, and it definitely will worm them and that stuff. But maybe it'll help prevent some of that. I don't get a lot of losses anymore. I mean, I went from like 90% down to maybe 5 or 10% loss with it. And having the turkeys has helped a little bit, but I'm going to try this and we'll report back if I have any better results. So I had another bird that was really bad. He was already limping, and I used the pills on him, and that didn't work. So I think he was too far gone. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Jonathan, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks.
To see you on your way out, but thank you. I'll see you at Time O's wedding and reception. That should hope nobody films anything there. I can imagine how that's
go live from there. That ought to be
you know what? We could have a special live, baby. We could do that. But good seeing you again. I'm glad that Amber's doing good. The kids are doing good. I see it was Pops' birthday. I wished him a happy birthday.
Yep.
Get some wine out, man. If I ever get that crazy, then where the hell am I going to go if I can't always rely on you? It's not just about you, Jonathan. Think of me.
I know it. I had to put blinders on them, those little nose blinders. I had to put Terry Lund messaged me and said, try that. Maybe they'll stop eating their eggs. And I've done that, and I'm starting to get some eggs. So they're going in the incubator. We'll see what happens. But anyway, no, thanks for having me. Had a blast. I love what you guys are doing, and look forward to the next episodes.
Hey, all right. And anytime you want to come back on, just drop us a line. Something happens, you want to talk about it. This is not a real high-tech thing. We could do this within hours if we had to. I mean, old guys that
Absolutely.
figure out where the hell the iPad is or something, but
Well, we must have bored everybody to death. Nobody commented, so I probably won't come back until somebody's excited.
I kind of jumped on Facebook up here while I'm on the computer, and I don't think that's working. So we'll get it uploaded here, and they can put their comments underneath. But there is a way we can live stream. We just haven't been brave enough to do it yet. So, all right, we'll see you guys.
Take care now.
Thanks. See you.
Bye-bye. Peace.